The Pope in Colombia, a message of peace and unity for a country emerging from 5 decades of armed conflict. Irma barrels through as Florida prepares for the hurricane after leaving a trail of destruction in the Caribbean. Steve Bannon blasts the church.
They need illegal aliens. They need illegal aliens to fill the churches.
The former White House strategist tells 60 Minutes why the church is wrong about DACA. Supreme Court case, the battling baker and owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop talks to me about his First Amendment rights and religious liberty. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, September 7th, 2017.
Como una excusa para suscitar un encuentro. Y acá voy.
Pope Francis is asking the people of Colombia to come together after 5 decades of armed conflict. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The Holy Father hopes his 5-day trip will help the nation heal. Pope Francis receives a raucous welcome on his first full day in Colombia. Dancers dressed in traditional costumes performed for the pontiff. And he blessed a little girl and greeted well-wishers with disabilities.
Gracias, Su Santidad. Colombia es el único país del mundo donde hoy
Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos thanked the Pope for confirming his people in faith, unity, and love.
Los invito al compromiso, no al cumplimiento.
Francis urging Colombians to heal wounds and build bridges on this trip. History's first Latin American Pope is relishing in the adoration of one of the continent's most staunchly Roman Catholic countries. We will have more coverage in just a few minutes, including a report from Colombia. Miami Beach's mayor is calling Irma a nuclear hurricane. The largest mass evacuation in U.S. history is taking place in Florida as the Category 5 storm barrels toward the United States. Nations are rushing to help islands like St. Thomas, St. Martin, and Barbuda. Officials there describing the damage as unprecedented. Forecasters still aren't certain where in Florida or Georgia the storm will hit, but residents are preparing. They're stocking up on supplies and gasoline, waiting up to 2 hours at the pump in some areas. Others are evacuating. And meanwhile, cleanup continues from Hurricane Harvey in Texas. As we showed you last week, churches and parishioners are being helped by volunteers from many organizations, including Catholic Charities. Now, President Trump announced he and the First Lady are donating $1 million of their own money to help, and $25,000 will go to Catholic Charities. Other donations include $100,000 to Samaritan's Purse and $300,000 to the Red Cross and Salvation Army. Late this afternoon, the Senate passed a $15.3 billion aid package for Harvey. The bill also extends the U.S. borrowing authority to prevent a government shutdown next month. President Trump now says dreamers have nothing to worry about, even though he canceled the program that allowed young immigrants to live and work in the U.S. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president urges Congress to help the dreamers while still securing America's borders. His administration has already started the process of terminating deferred action for childhood arrivals, known as DACA. Still, today the president tweets, "For all of those DACA that are concerned about your status during the 6-month period, you have nothing to worry about. No action." Trump will need bipartisan support in Congress to pass immigration reform. During his visit with the Emir of Kuwait today, the president seemed to think that is possible after he worked out a deal with Democrats on extending the debt ceiling.
I think we will have a different relationship than you've been watching over the last number of years.
The president struck a deal with Democrats yesterday, giving a 3-month extension on the debt ceiling, which is tied to a bill for hurricane relief. Trump overruled congressional Republicans like Speaker Paul Ryan, who wanted to stretch the debt limit across a longer period of time.
Look, personally, I think the debt limit in the credit markets, the longer, the better for the stability of the credit markets. That's my strong opinion. But he was interested in making sure that this is a bipartisan moment while we respond to these hurricanes. And he made that clear, and I think that's what his motivation was.
The president has invited Speaker of the House Paul Ryan to dinner tonight at the White House. President Trump said today there are a lot of good reasons to get rid of the debt ceiling entirely. He said that idea came up in his meeting with congressional leaders. Lauren.
Mark, today Donald Trump Jr. met with staff from the Senate Judiciary Committee behind closed doors. What happened?
Donald Trump Jr. tells investigators he didn't recall White House involvement in a June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower. His statement was part of special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into whether the Trump campaign coordinated with Russia to influence the outcome of the election.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. Former presidential advisor Steve Bannon lashes out at the Catholic Church, saying it has an economic interest in unlimited immigration. He criticized the bishops and Cardinal Dolan during an interview for 60 Minutes, which will air on Sunday. Let's listen.
The Catholic Church has been terrible about this.
Okay, fair.
The bishops have been terrible about this. They need illegal aliens. They need illegal aliens to fill the churches.
Joining us now, Tim Carney, commentary editor of the Washington Examiner and visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Tim, welcome back.
Thank you.
Is Steve Bannon going rogue?
Well, Steve Bannon has always been rogue, even when he was in the White House, and he has an interesting sort of history where he often does tap into sort of the teachings and the history of the Catholic Church because he sees it as a foundation of Western civilization. But on the other hand, I think his brand of politics deviates quite a bit from Catholic teaching on a handful of scores, and immigration is basically the center of that.
Is he more conservative than Donald Trump?
No, he's not more conservative. He's more populist. He was the one who saw populism as sort of the closest thing Trump had to a philosophy and tried to articulate it. But again, he often is on the same page as the Catholic Church, in part because he sees it as a bulwark against either collapse of civilization or against Islam or something like that. But in this case, he looks at what he thinks is the U.S. national interest, the interest of the working man in America, and that's against more immigration coming in. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church teaches us, to be welcoming, and as we do to the least of our brothers, so we do to Jesus. And he sees, more importantly, the behavior of bishops being so in favor of pro-immigration policies, and he thinks that that's undermining the interests of Americans.
The Catechism says that we are to welcome the stranger with charity, but also respect borders. So by attacking the church here, and the majority of Catholics voted for Donald Trump, is he helping the president achieve his goal of ultimately finding an immigration reform?
No, I think it was a big misstep on Bannon's part. I think that most Americans' view on immigration is that we ought to be welcoming, but that immigration policy ought to look out for Americans and not be necessarily looking out for people in other countries. And that Bannon sort of attacking the churches, which is primarily just expressing a welcoming stance, I think further creates a schism.
Let's take a listen to what else he had to say.
I totally respect the Pope, and I totally respect the Catholic bishops and cardinals on doctrine. This is not about doctrine. This is about the sovereignty of a nation. And in that regard, they're just another guy with an opinion.
Will these attacks make life difficult for Donald Trump?
I think they can, because there have been a lot of Catholics who voted for Trump with lots of concerns, both about his personal life, whether he has a dedication to the pro-life view, all sorts of things, including immigration, and that they sort of held their nose and voted for him because the alternative was Hillary Clinton. They were worried about religious liberty, the Supreme Court. And if they see Trump having an antagonism to Catholic teaching, that'll make it a lot harder for them to hold their nose. But the point that Bannon makes that most politicians have ignored, is that sovereignty is really an important thing. And the Catholic Church has never challenged the right of a country to sort of set its own will, set its own borders.
Respecting borders, and that is in the Catechism.
And so if Trump can articulate how the teaching and the sovereignty go together, we'd be in a good place.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your insight. Tim Carney, commentary editor of the Washington Examiner.
Thank you. U.S.
Senator Dianne Feinstein draws harsh criticism today after questioning the faith of a Catholic judicial nominee. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi broke this story and confronted the senator today.
Lauren, President Trump's pick to serve as an appeals court judge didn't hide her Catholic faith during her confirmation hearing. But Senator Feinstein expresses concerns that the faith will cloud judgment. Many prominent faithful are calling Feinstein to apologize for what they're calling an anti-Catholic attack.
So help you God.
Notre Dame law professor and Catholic mother of 7, Amy Barrett, draws fire for her faith.
The dogma lives loudly within you. And that's of concern when you come to big issues that large numbers of people have fought for.
California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein questions Barrett's Catholic convictions and asks if the appeals court nominee's religion will trump the law. We broke the news and it exploded on social media. Prominent Catholic Princeton professor Robert George tweets, "This is disgusting. Catholics should not tolerate liberal bigotry a moment longer. Senator Feinstein, you've shown your true colors. Resign." Conservative court watcher Carrie Severino issues her verdict on Feinstein's words.
That's worrisome. It seems like she has almost a no faithful Catholics need apply rule here.
We wanted to give the senator a chance to respond. Senator, do you owe an apology to Amy Barrett for saying you were worried about the dogma living loudly within her, Senator? So we waited. Yesterday to Amy Barrett, you said the dogma lives loudly within her and you're concerned about that. Is that inappropriate?
Is what inappropriate?
To tell a judicial nominee that you're concerned about her dogma.
I'm concerned about the kind of judge she would be.
About the legal doctrine.
And she's not alone. Number 2 Senate Democrat Dick Durbin also questions Barrett's faith.
Do you consider yourself an Orthodox Catholic?
I am a Catholic, Senator Durbin.
Again and again, Barrett tells the senators she won't let her Catholic faith stop her from following Supreme Court precedent on abortion, marriage, or the death penalty, and she says she would never put religious views above the law.
It's never appropriate for a judge to impose that judge's personal convictions, whether they derive from faith or anywhere else.
The Catholic League's President Bill Donahue sent letters to both Senators Durbin and Feinstein. In it, he asks if they've ever probed the faith of a non-Catholic. He rebukes them, saying they came very close to applying an unconstitutional religious test to the nominee. Lauren?
Clashes in Myanmar have killed at least 400 people. That's according to the country's military. Most of the dead are insurgents who are blamed for setting villages on fire, including the village of Rohingya. More than 140,000 people have fled the region to Bangladesh since the end of August. The son of Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte appear at a Senate inquiry looking into a shipment of illegal drugs from China.
Once and for all, I now have the time to deny any and all baseless allegations thrown against me.
Paolo Duterte was mentioned as allegedly belonging to a group receiving bribes from smugglers. He denies any wrongdoing. His father has been accused of condoning extrajudicial killings of drug suspects. And we continue our special coverage of the Pope's visit to Colombia. The Holy Father arrived this morning and urged Colombians to come together to heal the divisions in the country. Pope Francis urged young Colombians to take the lead in promoting forgiveness. This is the first papal visit to the country since 1986. Audrey Hughes is a reporter for the Associated Press. She joins us from Bogota, Colombia. Tell us where you are. Tell us about the energy.
Absolutely. So I'm right now in Parque Simón Bolívar, which is the location where the Pope is giving Mass and doing his 30-minute tour in the Pope Mobile around the park. I am now surrounded by 600,000 people who are elated to see the Pope.
What are people telling you?
People overall are just generally very grateful that the Pope has chosen to visit Colombia, especially in this historic moment, as a sign of support and solidarity to move forward with the peace process.
The Pope is talking a lot about peace and unity, the civil war that has been going on for 50 years. Do you believe, with the people that you have talked to, Catholics, that they are together on this peace accord?
Yes, I definitely think that's a key topic for the Pope. Since he's arrived, he has definitely been emphasizing reconciliation and calling on all Colombians to do their part to rebuild a more peaceful and united society. So unification has been a key message.
Tell me about what the mood is among people. I know you say there's a lot of energy. Do you feel like they are super excited to see the Pope? Is it just another guest? Tell us about that.
No, absolutely. The energy is palpable, and this has been something that Colombia media has been building on for the past several weeks with countdowns. This has been the sole topic of conversation, at any water cooler for the past several weeks. So the culmination of it today is definitely something special to witness.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Audrey Hughes with the Associated Press.
Thank you.
Coming up, gay rights at the Supreme Court. The owner of a cake shop in Colorado joins us to talk about how his faith impacted his decision to say no. The Catholic charity Aid to the Church in Need reports Christian children in Sudan will not receive food unless they say Islamic prayers. The charity is citing reliable sources who say Christian refugees are dealing with a terrible situation. There are about 700,000 Christian refugees in that country. And a new study finds here in the U.S. white Christians are now a minority. Christians overall, however, remain a large majority in the U.S. at nearly 70%. Of those, 20% identify as Catholic, and the state with the most Catholics is Rhode Island, with 41%. At the bottom, tied with 7%, Alabama, Arkansas, and Utah. The Supreme Court is set to consider the case Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission later this year. The justices will decide between a collision of religious beliefs and laws barring discrimination against LGBT people. Master Cake Shop owner Jack Phillips refused to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple because of his faith. Yet Phillips offered to sell any other product from his shop to the couple. Joining me now is the baker at the center of that case, Jack Phillips, and his attorney, Kristen Wagoner, who is with the advocacy group Alliance Defending Freedom. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jack, your view is that you won't make the cake for the event, and it's not about the people. You also have said that you refuse to do cakes for all kinds of events. What are those other events?
Well, some of the other events that we decline to make cakes for would be, say, Halloween cakes, or cakes that would be anti-American, or cakes that would be racist. I declined to do a cake one time for a gentleman who wanted to make a cake to basically tell his boss that he was a jerk. And because it was disparaging another person, I decided not to do that. I had another gentleman that came in one time and wanted me to make half of a 3-tiered wedding cake to celebrate his divorce. And because in my mind, somebody on the other end of that marriage has probably been hurt, and maybe hurt badly, and he was celebrating that, I declined to do that.
But this means that your business is hurting, and you're not even making wedding cakes at all now.
Yeah, we're not making wedding cakes because the state ordered me to create cakes for same-sex weddings, which is something that goes against the core of who I am and all the things that I believe in.
Ms. Wagner, as his attorney, you know that the couple, David and Charlie, have said that the law is squarely on their side and that the right to religious beliefs is fundamental, but discrimination is not. How do you answer that? How do you balance a person's religious beliefs with another person's civil liberties?
Well, we certainly are talking about civil liberties, and the rights at stake in this case are the rights of all Americans to be able to express ideas and celebrate events that are consistent with their convictions. So regardless of what one's beliefs are in same-sex marriage, we should still support the rights of people like Jack, even if we disagree with those beliefs, because we sink or swim together. Tolerance is a two-way street.
How would the Supreme Court's ruling, do you think, in this case, impact same-sex marriage laws, if at all?
It should have no impact on same-sex marriage. That's not what this case is about. This case is about the First Amendment freedoms of all Americans and all artists to be able to create artistic expression that is consistent with their convictions, and whether they will be forced to create artistic expression and celebrate and participate in religious events that violate their convictions under fear of government punishment, anything that ranges from a fine to actually spending time in jail, civil and criminal penalties. We all want freedom, and it doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or a Catholic.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back after the Supreme Court rules. Jack Phillips and his attorney, Kristen Wagner, with Alliance Defending Freedom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, one man's true identity. We'll talk to the author of a new book about his search for happiness and peace. Plus, the Pope movie. We'll tell you who's been tapped to play the Holy Father. The Catholic Church teaches marriage can only exist between a man and a woman, and our next guest just released a book sharing his journey living with same-sex attraction as a Roman Catholic. And he has committed his life to chastity. Daniel Mattson is the author of Why I Don't Call Myself Gay. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Why did you write this book?
Well, the answer comes from 1 Peter 3:15. To always be prepared to have an answer for the hope that lies within you. And for me, I actually found the peace and happiness I'd been searching for my whole life in the Catholic Church. And I wanted to share that good news. We have to really have confidence as Catholics that what we have, the good news we have concerning chastity, is a key for people to have freedom and peace.
So you said you came back to the church in 2009, and you wrote that the teaching that really helped you swim against the tide of the world's thinking about sexuality was Pope St. John Paul II's encyclical Splendor of Truth, which says that there's some things that don't change and are ultimately just founded upon Christ, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Let's read what you wrote. The Church understands that deep-seated homosexual tendencies that remain unresolved can have a negative impact on relating with others in a healthy and mature fashion. What do you mean by that?
Well, the question is, who am I? That's the question we always ask ourselves. People have been asking that forever. For me, I was confronted with these attractions to the same sex, and for a time I thought...
Since you were 6.
Since I was 6, and I wrestled with these, knowing that God was clear on the morality of these issues. But I wondered who I am. How am I going to have happiness, peace, and freedom? And so for a while I thought, okay, the world has said that who we feel ourselves to be is who we are, so I embraced this identity as a gay person. I found a man to share my life with. Well, it didn't lead to fulfillment in peace and freedom. And what's beautiful about the teachings of the Church in that Veritatis Splendor, the splendor of truth, St. John Paul II, he says, there are things that transcend the cultures in which we live, and that's the fundamental truth of our created dignity as male and female. And I found that really liberating to me, and to find that my true sexual orientation is towards women. I may not experience it, but the Church invites me to realize that going outside of that, I realized my attractions to men was a sexual disorientation. And if I were to follow those, it would not lead to peace and fulfillment. And so that's why the Church has been so liberating for me.
So you've written, there's been a documentary, and now the book, Why I Don't Call Myself Gay. Daniel Mattson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
EWTN Pro-Life Weekly airs at a new time starting this week, Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern, and tonight, Catherine Zeltner talks about pro-life group Crossroads and their 10,000-mile journey from California to Washington, D.C.
A woman came up to us and she said that 12 years ago her sister had become pregnant and had actually booked an abortion, but it was because of the Crossroads witness, and we don't know how, whether it was through prayer or whether it was she saw us on the side of the road or speaking at one of the masses, but she ended up having a change of heart, and because of that there are two 12-year-old girls still living today.
You can see more on Crossroads tonight on Pro-Life Weekly. It airs at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. It will re-air Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Finally, tonight, Netflix is moving forward with a feature film about the Pope. Deadline reports Jonathan Pryce has been tapped to play Pope Francis, while Anthony Hopkins is in talks to play Pope Benedict. I think they kind of all both look like each other. They will tell the story of Benedict's retirement and Francis as the first Jesuit pope. Filming is expected to start in November in Argentina. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.